Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to continue our top 10 rankings by class, and we're going to be talking about the tech class. And as we have in all the other videos, before we get started, two major shout outs. First to Vega, the head of the Illuminati and also the greatest tier list in all of MCOC. He's the one that encouraged us to make these lists, and we'll also be doing some content on his own, so make sure you check out anything in this series. And then of course to Misty K, great artist and graphic designer in our community, and she made all of these nifty graphics that we will be sharing around, and you'll get to see the full graphic at the end for all of my tech champions. Now before we get started, tech was a little bit of a weird class. I feel like there is a lot of lateral compatibility on this list in terms of like, it's not very easy to come up with a number 1 who's significantly better than number 5 and number 10 and number 12. It's sort of like there is a baseline of tech utility that is there that has them help make this list, but there's so many interchangeable abilities and specific abilities that you want to choose based on the situation that it is very hard to just go sequentially. However, I tried my best based on the way I play the game and the champions that I tend to grab first in the most generic of situations, and that's kind of how I constructed this list. Now, like the other videos, there will first be a personal list. This is how I play the game, which is mostly sort of looking at the content, getting through anything that's sort of end game content for the rewards, using my roster, the variety of the roster, trying to use as few items as possible, practicing going in there. And then there's a little bit of battlegrounds and of course a lot of fun. I am not playing competitive Alliance War currently, and you can see that in the ratings that I'm mostly about content and having fun with a little bit of BGs. That's sort of my framing when I'm ranking up champions, but at the end I will give a more objective list based on who I think the average MCOC player should rank for the most bang for buck. However, the more I'm doing these, the more I realize it's more fun to talk about my personal choices, and if you happen to play the game the way I do, then this might be useful to you, or just hearing me talk about some of my favorite champions. So without further ado, we're going to get into my personal list, starting with 3 honorable mentions. And honorable mention number 1 is going to be Warlock. Now, Warlock goes a lot higher if Battlegrounds matters for you and if War matters for you, simply due to the fact that the way the willpower mastery on defenders interacts with his kit makes him infinitely more valuable. However, if you don't have that constant healing that you can get your infection on, get the degens, get the constant power drain, he's just a pretty good tech champion. And yes, he has bleed immunity, he has cold snap immunity, he has one of the best versions of a heal block in the game because it's not technically a heal block, has armor break, really big crit numbers. He shows up in a lot of situations as a great tech champion. I just think without that willpower mastery, he does lose a lot of his value, because that's really what makes him one of the best Battlegrounds champions, and for a long time one of the best war champions, until people stopped placing with willpower mastery on. That said, we've seen this guy for a long time. We know what he can do. Certainly will be higher on the list when I do the more objective one, but for the way I'm playing the game currently, he is an honorable mention. Next up is Ultron, and I really debated where to put Ultron because he is so good. He's got great immunities, especially when he is high sig. He basically has like 4 immunities, and on top of that, just really good utility in terms of like how guaranteed everything he does is, and those massive regens. He is going to be an amazing war attacker for a long time for sure, especially as people start getting the 7 stars and getting him sigged up. But again, just for me, in the way I'm playing the game, I think he's lacking a little bit of utility, except for the immunities and the damage and things like that. I just think he doesn't quite do enough for me as a tech champion to be grabbing him, aside from like wishing I had him for Hazard Shift in War. Now, next up is going to be Guardian as an honorable mention, and I absolutely love Guardian. It's just they keep making new champions that sort of do some of the stuff he does, like contacting parrying non-contact hits, not critting, crit replacements, beefy armor and energy resistance and things like that. I just feel like he was sort of the first one in a class of champions that did all that stuff, which is really cool, and he's still amazing, especially if you get him sigged up. He's an absolute tank, he's a nuke, good for battlegrounds in a lot of ways. I've always enjoyed playing him. I love the parrying of the specials that gives you a little bit of a head up on your power, and just does so much more. I can't even get into everything that he does. However, I just think for me personally, he's an honorable mention because everyone I'm about to say after, I just think they have more utility and I rate them higher. So with that said, we're going to get into my personal top 10. And coming in at number 10 is going to be Shuri. Now, for Necropolis, Shuri was an absolute must. She pulled her weight in that thing for me so hard. And I do think she is a phenomenal champion. There are more and more domino counters coming out, but she is one of the best, the way that she can't get, the ability reduction from domino. I love that she doesn't crit at times, but she can also guaranteed crit at times. That can come in handy. Of course, if the fight is long enough, building up all the passive shocks and the active shocks is incredible damage. She can counter unblockable as well. She can go untouchable, which if you're really keeping track of all your little charges, you can utilize that to avoid annoying specials. Very tanky, very reliable. All of her damage is energy and non-contact, which is kind of insane. It really opens up some certain situations for her. I do think she's a phenomenal champ. I just think, again, everyone that I'm about to list above her just has a slight leg up on her, but everything I just said plus more, she is a phenomenal tech champion and easily makes the top 10, could go higher. Now coming in at number 9, I have Omega Sentinel. And I've always been a big fan of Omega Sentinel. She is available as a 7-star, which really helps, but she has a few things going for her that is unique in this class. First of all, Nullify immunity. This obviously comes up when you're going up against Mystics, but it also works for stuff like Power Snack and Buffet. And any time that there's a kind of node or champion that has the ability to nullify, you can just keep your armor ups, which is absolutely phenomenal. She has a little bit of a hectic play style, but as long as you're landing your light ending combos and you're keeping your pauses up, it's not too hard to ramp her up. And when she's awakened, she has an amazing prowess punishing ability for lots of damage over time. And then of course, if you utilize like a lot of buildup and throwing the special 3, she does some absolutely insane damage. But I do really love her customizability. She is, she doesn't take damage from bleed and poison, but has the ability to regen off of it, which is unlike any other robot. She doesn't have willpower, but the fact that she does have that self-repair is really cool. Really good heal block, really big cowardice, which always comes into play. And when you combine that with her armor ups and the cowardice, she becomes extremely tanky. And then of course the miss counter. She's the first person to have a tracking debuff. I love miss counters in any class, and that really does come up quite often. She can have all 3 of these effects available all at once, or she can choose one and stick to it. And then, on top of that, she also has pretty much one of the highest attack ratings in the game. So even if you don't want to use specials, there's a lot of nodes where just comboing with her is going to really chip away at health because it is so high. So Omega Sentinel really comes up a lot because of her utility, and the damage is good enough, especially if you play her well, that she does quite amazingly. And because of that, I've always been a huge fan. Now coming in at number 8, we have Shocker. And Shocker is one of my most wanted 7 stars for a few reasons. I mean, just the way that he plays is absolutely hilarious to me, that he does just like the big white numbers, but he's really easy to build up. And you just throw a special 1 or 2, throw the special 2, stun them, and then the heavy is going to kill most things. Like for a while he was the best onslaught counter in the game, and he has the ability to get rid of prowess as well. I don't have a lot of experience with him, but a lot of really smart players rate this guy really high, and I've seen what he can do. And it's really because of those reasons that I want this guy. He's also an annoying defender, which does come up every once in a while. But yeah, I've always really enjoyed this guy. He has the ability to stun as well and go unblockable. And one of the most annoying things about him on defense is that as soon as he gets a little bit too high, he's going to auto block your specials, so you have to land intercepts against him. And really good two-way in my opinion for battlegrounds. Even though I don't rate that super high, I think he would add a lot of value to my account. And like I said, very simple style. you know, you throw a few of the special ones, especially if he's duped, you get them back really quickly, and then just not many things can survive that massive heavy attack. And it's not a burst, it's just like a big hit, which can come in handy every once in a while. Not to mention he's got shock immunity, and yeah, just really good champ overall. And if I had more experience with him, maybe I'd rate him higher, but I always saw a lot of potential with this guy even before he got buffed, in my opinion. I think he is just a really cool champion, and even when he first came out, I rated him a little bit higher than other people just because I thought he was so unique in the way that he does his damage and his abilities in the tech class. It's nice to see, you know, not energy damage and not relying on crits, not relying on red damage, just like a big hit killing them is really unique, and it helps him get beyond just the usual tech mutant matchups. Like, he really comes into play for so many different types of matchups. One of the favorites, if there's some kind of Eternity of Pain challenge and there's like a Sinister 6, he's usually going to be the guy you want to pick for that. Amazing champion. Shocker is my number 8. Now, number 7 is going to be Future Ant-Man, who is for sure paying the 6-star tax right now because he is an amazing tech, like one of the best, and probably goes higher if he ever becomes a 7-star and we end up getting more Sig Stones. But I do really rate his Sig ability at high Sig. The extra protection, the ability to essentially get immunities and heal off of them when it comes to like Incinerate and Bleed, very, very valuable to me, and it just opens up the kinds of matchups that he can take. But he does have a very cool power control style where you can be passive enough, land some intercepts, bait some heavy attacks, and in doing so, you're essentially allowing them to never throw a special or very rarely throw a special. He's got big bursts off of his special too, and he's got the disintegration, which does a little bit of damage over time, but more importantly, it reduces the combat power rate. If you throw collar tech on top of that, it's like they're barely ever getting any power. But yeah, he just has a lot of utility, and he's definitely annoying to fight if you do care about two ways. But for the most part, like as a tech 6-star, when 6 stars were still the king, he was the clear best champion for a very long time. And I think once he comes back out as a 7-star, that's going to happen again. But for me personally, I think just 6 stars are losing a little bit of style, and unless if they're like really, really special, like, you know, Kate Bishop or Dr. Doom or something, like they do lose a little bit of value just due to the way the stats are and, you know, stat focus and challenge rating and things like that. So he does suffer from that a little bit, and I found that I've been using him less and less. However, you cannot deny that his power control, his tankiness, and just sort of the way he works with AI manipulation and safety nets and immunities and things like that. He's got so much going on, and he is making a bit of a comeback because you're probably going to want to use him in the Necropolis for the Dimensional Beings tag. I don't see any other way around it for Silver Centurion besides using him. So, you know, very valuable champ. He's going to go higher in the objective list where I don't really consider 6-star and 7-star, but at least for me personally, there are better champions that I choose off of the shelf than him because he's a 6-star, but he is still in my top 10 at number 7. Okay, number 6 is going to be Hulkbuster, and remember that I am approaching this from like mostly content and questing. And, you know, when it comes to questing, this guy's almost unstoppable because the way that his massive power drain works, if you were good at manipulating the AI and hitting that thing into block, it's just absolutely crazy. And, you know, he's an absolute tank as well. He's got really good regen to keep him alive, and offensive ability accuracy reduction, armor break, unblockable. It just goes on and on and on. But if you are comfortable with him and you're able to sort of end your combo string, have them throw down your block, and then throw that giant special 2 that's going to drain them down to nothing and power lock them, you're in really good shape. The special 1 is a single hit with an armor break, and if that single hit crits, you get a huge cash out even on the special 1. But yeah, a very simple rework from a long time ago. He has access to shock as well, which will increase his damage. And, you know, if you've ever watched Karate Mike or one of those big Hulkbuster players, it's just not much can stop him. He's a little bit broken in the way that his power control works, but it does take a little bit of skill, and you need to know your spacing and know sort of like not only the animations, but like how to connect into their block and things like that. But once you have that stuff down, you could almost throw him anywhere and he's going to do some crazy things. So maybe not the best battlegrounds champion, and people don't necessarily use him in war because of like stand your ground and stuff like that. But again, going through like just looking at content and fun and things like that, Hulkbuster is super high rated for me, and he comes in at number 6. Now, number 5 is going to be personally my most wanted champion, and that is Jack-O-Lantern. Now, he hasn't been around for too long, and a lot of people sort of are saying, oh, he's just an onslaught counter. But like I've said, when we did the Mystic video, I was talking about how Serpent counters, yes, they're really good for Serpent, but Serpent throws so many defensive threats at you that if you're countering the things that Serpent does, I'm pretty sure that those abilities are going to work on other nodes and other champions, whether it's now or in the future. And a lot of that can be said about Jack-O-Lantern, because he can parry non-contact hits, he's immune to reverse controls, and he basically can like hold block and not take energy damage into the block. He has a cowardice that also has a little bit of AI manipulation, and then, you know, against mutants he has that great plasma replacement for Incinerate, which is absolutely awesome. Now, I don't have him, but he is very simple to use. You just kind of build up his little passives and then throw a big special 2. It's really good damage. It's either plasma or Incinerate against mutants, but also poison, which I kind of like that there's another source of damage. Like, it does limit him. If there's any one of those immunities, then he's going to do less output. But yeah, very simple to play and has really good utility. You know, I always love reverse controls immunity when it comes up, because there's more and more situations where we need that. And I just like that you bring him in, you pretty much do the same rotation, and he's just going to do some pretty incredible damage with a bunch of utility to back it up. And yeah, can't wait to get my hands on this guy, because I think he's going to really add a lot to my roster. And besides being just a great onslaught counter, I think he's going to bring a lot to the contest as well, as we see more people getting him. All right, so next up at number 4 is going to be Spider-Man Stark Enhanced, who, like, for me is honestly number 1, but you know, I had to be a little bit objective even in my personal ratings. And currently, I think it was almost a mistake to release this guy, because his damage is, the way it scales at 7 stars, just absolutely crazy. Once you build up your poise, his combos are hitting, you know, easily into the like 17 to 25k on just like basic hits. He's hitting like 45k on a heavy attack. And the way he works with relics, where you can do like special 1 stun into relic, into more special 1 stun, all while keeping your poise at like 10, you know, even after a few of those combo strings, you're down to like 7, which is still totally crazy. And, you know, on top of that, he has a little bit of power control. He has taunt. That's kind of all you need when you have that much damage. I mean, for Battlegrounds, he is one of the best attackers for any defender. But I've even found for Eternity of Pain fights with these large health pools, I've brought him in and not necessarily cheesed it, but just absolutely made a laughing stock out of some champions. I have a video of the Photon from, I think, Summer of Suffering or the Spring of Sorrow. It was one of them, but it was Photon. And, you know, he doesn't have miscontrol. He doesn't have much way to deal with her aside getting lucky from evading every once in a while, but he absolutely nuked her, and those are like over 1 million health. So he alone with the damage and the like little bit of power control that he has is just absolutely nuts. And especially from like a questing and sort of Eternity of Pain style of play, where those are like the main things I'm trying to counter now, he just absolutely rinses everything. But he's also really good for Battlegrounds, so I would highly recommend him for a lot of people. I'm one of the only people that has a duped one. Just he isn't very readily available, and mine is Sig 60, which in my opinion is plenty. If you throw on the crit stat focus on top of that, like, you are basically critting on every hit once you get to 10 poise. Just the way that scales, it'll get better and better. When he has less poise, the higher your Sig goes, but at 10 poise, I feel like 60 Sig is absolutely fine. But yeah, just we've known what this guy can do for such a long time. He was pretty late to being added to 6-star. A lot of people use the 5-star to clear Labyrinth of Legends, and then he was a 6-star, but he's already a 7-star. And if you're lucky enough to have him, I think bring him to rank 3 right now and like continue to rank him, because as the defenders get more scary, you're going to have a rank 4 Starkey and a rank 5 and a rank 6, and he's just going to be able to continue to wipe out these health pools. He's a detriment because of how good he is, in my opinion, and how high his damage is. And but at the same time, he's so fun and so nostalgic. I absolutely love this champion. All right, we're down to the top 3, and coming in at number 3 is going to be Prowler. And the theme that we're going to see about these top 3 champions is not that they're like the best Battlegrounds champion, not that they're the highest damage dealer, but they bring the most utility to the table, in my opinion. And Prowler, if you want to use him in Battlegrounds, I do highly recommend the high sig. You want to have that high crit rate during the Incinerate, so that when you're setting up your big special 2, you get the Incinerate on them, you get the Falter on them, and then you're going to sustain those ruptures that are not necessarily guaranteed, but when you have a higher crit rate, they're mostly guaranteed to happen. It's going to be nuke potential when you have a high sig Prowler. But the thing is, if you can take your time, Unawakened, he has all of his utility. He's got some immunities to certain debuffs like bleed, and he also, I can't remember what the other one is, I think it's Incinerate. And then he also has the immunity to Falter, which I love. Falter is probably one of the most annoying kinds of miss. It doesn't cover like Untouchable or just other misses in the kits, but Falter, especially when it comes to nodes, shows up all the time. And he's a non-critter, which is always nice, and he's got the crit replacement. But just the way he works, the way he has immunities, and the amount of utility that he brings to the table just makes him an absolute amazing champion, in my opinion. Some other quick hits: he does have the Pursuit effect, which is the anti-evade. It makes him pretty much the best Nightcrawler counter, and that is like super duper easy to keep up, which we absolutely love. He does have access to openings through offensive miss, and you can utilize that to get the Incinerate on them if you can't necessarily parry and things like that. And just the way his power drain works in general, and the way he built his own charges is really cool. Like I think there was a synergy for Vision where like they throw the special and they drain the power all the way to 0, and he just does that naturally in his kit. So you can push them to like 1.9 bars of power and they get all the way down to 0, and that's how you build up your own charges. But yeah, it's a really good kit that, in my opinion, all of sort of the power control and Falter and mutant problems that we have in the contest, he can sort of just solve if he goes slowly. But then if he is awakened and he has the high sig, he's also an absolute nuke in Battlegrounds. And when I was inspecting his kit, I was just thinking of so many different matchups in across the entire contest that this guy has some ability to counter, and that's what I absolutely love about him. I feel like for the utility budget, they only gave him a 4 out of 5 in utility, but in my opinion, he's a 5 out of 5 when you consider the immunities, the power control, the offensive miss, the defensive miss counter, the evade counter. He's just got stuff that a lot of techs don't necessarily have, and it's sort of the combination of that whole thing. If you get proficient with him, I think he's going to be an absolute beast for a long time. And then as people continue to sig him up, I think the damage is what's going to push him over the top, because if you line up those big special 2s where the ruptures are just sustaining, it's so crazy how fast they burst down with the red damage. So you gotta love it. This is sort of why like Guardian was a little bit lower, because these crit replacement champs are just a dime a dozen these days, and they're doing so much in the contest right now that like some of the older ones are getting a little overshadowed. And to me, Prowler, like if you just audit his kit, is an absolute beast because of all that utility that he brings, especially for questing, in my honest opinion. All right, so we've got our top 2. Number 2 for me is Iron Man, sort of the classic plug and play, easy to use champion that does what he needs to do. He can obviously invalidate prowess, which like for so long Nimrod was just such an absolute beast in this class, but like left and right Kabam is trying to figure out ways to shut down Nimrod. He's probably not going to be a 7-star. There's nodes in Alliance War and all over the place that are punishing shock, so it's really great to see a champion who can like block unblockables, who can remove prowess, who has great damage, really strong armor and tankiness and regen, who doesn't rely on shock, right? So he can basically do everything that you would want a tech champion to do, especially against annoying prowess mystics, and just do it sort of naturally, right? And he has Guardian's ability where if you're parrying the special attacks, whether they're beams or contacts, it's just like you're ramping up even faster. And he's got a really fun rotation where you do the special 2 first and then you spam special 1s. That's kind of rare. Like often in the contest, you're spamming special 1s to build and then cashing out with the special 2. I love a champion that cashes out with the special 1, places those armor breaks, just big yellow numbers. And you know, if he is high sig, the regen is just absolutely massive, and you can choose when you use it once per quest, which is kind of nice. I do kind of wish that you had access to it more than once, especially because sometimes I double tap and I miss it, but you know, that's a minor complaint. Just overall, like in terms of a massive rework to make a champion relevant, who's so important to Marvel, I just love to see that Iron Man is really this good. I just don't see you ranking him to the highest level and being disappointed. Like he is maybe not the flashiest champion, but like how steady and true he is, and like what he brings to the table in the tech class, especially against mutants, but really against almost anything. Like how he's probably the best raids champ, you know, overall too, which is really fun to see. Not that raids really requires like, you know, specific ranking up, but it's just nice that you can use him there. I really enjoyed using him in Karate Mike's challenge and the gauntlets. He was very essential, like taking down that weapon X, even though he doesn't have healing control. So yeah, he's just got a lot going on, and like he just answers problems that you want in the tech class. And especially through my lens, we're talking about questing and content and things like that. He's got the Avengers tag and is one of the best Avengers out there, and just does everything that you want a tech champ to do in the game. Any mutant that you can think of that could use some kind of a counter, he's pretty much a good counter for, and that's why I like Iron Man so much. So with that, we're going to get to our number 1, and I may be the only content creator that rates her as number 1, although I bet Simula would rank her pretty high as well, and that's Ironheart. And again, I want to say at the beginning of this video, I talked about how it was really difficult to sequentially rank the 1 through 10, because I do believe all of these champions have their day and their matchups that you want to use them in. But for me personally, I have been so glad that I have a rank 3 Ironheart. Part of it was from the last Alliance War season. Even in Casual War, she was so important for that last tactic, but she comes up in so many situations due to a few things. First of all, she has the pre-fight for Rupture, and I really feel like Incinerate or Rupture as your currency and your damage source, like either or, it basically makes her available for almost every possible matchup. I can't think of a single matchup where Rupture and Incinerate will be off the table, so that means there's almost nothing that can stop her in terms of ramping up, in terms of doing her damage. And then on top of that, unless there's debuff immunity or something like that itself, but that tracking passive that she has is one of the most powerful mechanics in the entire game, because it not only fully counters miss with a passive, but it also gives her this insane ability on like the ability accuracy on block. And there's so many nodes. Like the classic one in War is the bullseye on the stunning reflection and polka dot power. Like she is tailor-made for that fight, and that is like something way outside of what you would normally think a tech champion can do, because she can stun on stunning reflection, she can take the hits to the block without taking any of the bleed damage, all that great stuff that Proxima Midnight and Cersei with her glancing have always been able to do. She can do that, and it is a 100% uptime once you get 5 debuffs on them. The tracking passive that she has is borderline broken due to the utility that it brings, and she's also reverse controls immune, which again always comes up, unless if you like forget that you're immune to Emma's specials and you accidentally dash forward. That's the only downside to it. She has really powerful regen, bulwark, armor, just an absolute tank in that sense. And she has a style where if you don't care about nuking, you can do special one spam. And I've talked about this before, champions that are viable with special 1 spam, in my opinion, are some of the best questers out there, because so often, in order to keep control of the fight, it's like you throw a special 1, you knock them down, you bait their special, you build back up to a special 1, you throw it. And if you get into that type of rhythm, it almost becomes brainless, where you don't have to think about, okay, what special am I going to use next? What else do I have to do? You just get in this really flow state of rhythm where you're just throwing the special 1s, and she can do that and, you know, maintain all of her damage and maintain all of her tracking and everything like that, keeping just total control of the fight. But then if it is time to cash out, her special 2 hits extremely hard, especially if you've been really good about, you know, maintaining your debuffs and your pauses and things like that. It's a really nice cash out to finish the fight. So she isn't necessarily like a stud in Battlegrounds, which is sort of why the reason not everybody rates her as high as I do. But I have found, again, whether it's like pain content, war content itself, even throwing her in the Battlegrounds deck, that she's just answers so many things that you want to, and really goes above and beyond what you expect the tech class to do. Like, she obviously has the armor for Havoc, she has the ability to choose energy or physical damage, which, you know, there's a lot of current tech champions that don't really answer stuff like Havoc and Bishop because of energy damage. And like, while she does have some energy hits on her beams and things like that, she can go straight to Rupture, which is physical, and not be feeding the abilities of annoying mutants that sort of like punish you for using energy, right? So she can do all that. And then again, just that tracking passive, it comes up so much. In addition to the miss counter and the ability accuracy thing we talked about, it also allows her to parry non-contact hits. And then also she can invalidate prowess, kind of like Iron Man can. And she has the regen that Iron Man has as well. So it's almost like she's an upgrade to OG Iron Man in the way that she does a lot of the things that he can. But with the tracking, it just makes her that much more powerful. There are so many things that it counters that Simula made a video on it, going over it, and it was just this astounding list of things that she's able to counter with it. Really one of the most OP mechanics in the game. Before Jack-o'-lantern, I think she was one of the best onslaught counters as well. And of course, like we talked about with the Rupture, that is the way she gets around his Incinerate punishing. But yeah, just for me personally, my favorite tech champion, if there is some need for a tech champion, I'm going to pick her because I play really well with her and she just answers so many different things. And that's why for me, Ironheart is my personal number 1. All right, so we're going to pull up the graphic and take a look at my sort of more objective list, my recommended list, and I'm just going to quickly go over some of the differences. First of all, I added Red Skull to one of the honorable mentions. I think especially if you're a little bit more Battlegrounds focused, he is an incredible two-way, really tanky and has good power control on offense and heal block and things like that, but you know, he's a stall defender as well. So for a lot of people, he's a really obvious rank up as a 7-star. I did throw Nimrod in the top 10. I do worry a little bit about Nimrod if he doesn't come out as a 7-star, because his big thing is erasing health pools when he's fully built up with the special 2 Sig 200. But if that is not erasing the health pool, he is not as strong as some other tech champions. And then plus, like I said, whether it's war or content, Kabam is really trying to punish Nimrod, especially with like some kind of shock replacement and things like that, which really hurts him. It also hurts champs like iDoom that aren't broken because like they have similar overlap in abilities that I don't love. But yeah, Nimrod obviously is still extremely powerful, and there's certain matchups where he's just an absolute nuke. So in my objective list, he does make the top 10, even though he didn't make my personal list. And then other than that, it was just kind of a shaking around of some of the orders. As I mentioned earlier, Future Ant-Man, probably objectively the best tech champion if he came out as a 7-star, so he's number 1 on this list. And also Warlock made it a lot higher because I do know a lot of people prioritize Battlegrounds, and he is one of the best two-ways in Battlegrounds, because even on defense, you can have a perfect counter, but unless if his name is Hulkling or a few other champions, it's really hard to not take annoying damage. And you know, also you don't crit on when you throw your specials for the most part, so that can be somewhat annoying as well. So anyway, that is my take on the tech class. One of the hardest ones for me to put together. I feel like if I was in a different mood on a different day, the list might have ended up a little differently, but I do think it does say a little bit about how I play the game. For me, Stark Enhanced Spider-Man and Ironheart are the ones I use the most for the reasons that I stated today, and I do feel pretty strongly about how I rated all these champions for people trying to have fun, trying to counter content, trying to do end game content to get the most rewards in the game, while taking Battlegrounds a little bit more casually. So anyway, that's going to do it for today. Let me know what you think. Make sure to give a watch to Vega and the other Illuminati's videos, and to say thank you to Misty K as well. If this was helpful to you, do leave a comment, because I do love discussing all this stuff in the comments. It's one of the most fun things I get to do as a content creator. Hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one.